we need to talk about rotting, about dank, smelly decay, about all these young people brain rotting online and the end of things. But before we get into that, I'm going to start at the beginning and tell you a bit about how and why I ended up here. So the story starts in 2019. I was at a climate camp in Germany with some friends. Pretty randomly, we ended up going on this excursion and being introduced to one of the weirdest ecosystems on Earth, peatlands. You might know them by other names: bog, mire, marsh, fen, swamp. Basically, peatlands are a kind of wetland that forms when you get a depression and a large pool of stagnant water. What happens is, as the plants die, the oxygen decreases and the pH changes. This means that the dead material can't fully decompose and gets preserved in the still water. Then, these layers of semi-decomposed organic material build up gradually over thousands of years. So, I'm going to be honest. Before going on this excursion, I didn't really know anything about peatlands. So, I was fascinated to learn how important they are for migratory birds, rare insects, and insect-eating plants, and how they create flood resilience, clean water, and protect people against fires and droughts. I was also amazed to learn how crucial they are in our climate system, that despite taking up just 3% of the planet's land surface area, they store more carbon than all forests combined. In fact, they store twice as much. The expert that took us on this field trip also explained that a lot of these peatlands are now degraded, which means that they're no longer locking up that carbon, but actually emitting vast amounts back into the atmosphere. Today, the emissions from drained peatlands alone accounts for roughly 5% of the total human-induced carbon emissions, which, for comparison, is more than twice the aviation industry. So, we were blown away by all this information, and I remember us going back to the camp and just being like, why are we not talking about peatlands? So on the bus back home, we came up with a pun, repeat, decided to form a collective, and have been working on the topic ever since. We're now a network of over 30 people working online across Europe. There's even some repeaters in the audience. Some of our projects have included hosting international peat festivals, taking hundreds of kids out on field trips, creating restoration camps for young people, and recently starting an ambitious campaign to ban peat extraction for horticultural use. So, fast forward a few years, and I decide I would start a master's in land and water management. And I'm here in Wageningen, learning all these solutions on how to optimize our water usage, adapt to climate change, and involve more stakeholders in our governance systems. And I keep thinking, this is great and everything, but I feel like I'm missing something. To most people, a degraded peatland just looks like a field. Where's the issue? Why care? So if I point out of the train window at a degraded peatland and I turn to the person next to me and I say to them, isn't that a tragedy? And all they see is this flat, open landscape with a few cows grazing lazily on a grassy field. They're going to look at me quite confused. But it is a tragedy. It's a tragedy that these dried out wetlands are now exacerbating the climate crisis, pushing those with the least resources to face erratic fires, floods, and droughts. It's an absolute tragedy that the migratory birds, rare insects, and insect-eating plants are now losing their homes, and that because of the current agricultural system, farmers are actually eroding their own soils. In fact, I find it hard to describe how tragic this mundane-looking landscape really is. And I suppose I'm worried that we're so busy being taught how to rationalize and compute our way out of all these issues that some of the most important lessons are buried just below the surface, impossible to see and to measure. What if my university's approach to the climate and ecological crisis was less focused on how to optimize for quality of life and was more concerned with teaching us how to tune in to the subtle quality of devastation? Which takes me back to rotting. Peatlands are masters of devastation, of rot and decay. When wet and healthy, they preserve the dead. Like ancestral carriers of the deceased, they hold layers of bodies with every hair, nail, leaf, beak, and stem perfectly intact. Yet when dry, they propel death, exacerbating floods and fires, increasing carbon emissions and water pollution. What I'm trying to say is that this ecosystem has a unique relationship with death and decay. And because of this, I think they reveal something about what we like to call the end of things. So, to illustrate this idea, I want to tell a little story. And I'd like to invite you to close your eyes like you would in a meditation. I want you to imagine that you're a small migratory bird. You've been flying all day over the choppy waves of the North Sea when you start to see land on the horizon. As you fly closer, you see a mosaic of textures and patterns below, making it difficult to judge the scale and depth. Flying further into this watery landscape, you start to feel exhaustion on your wings and the urge to land. And so, together with your flock, you descend from up high. The air is crisp, and the flat, open landscape allows you to see for miles around. Venturing deeper, you nestle down in the soft moss. You realize your body is actually very similar to the peatland, mostly carbon, water, and an array of microbial life. You feel connected to this boggy earth beneath. But just as you're starting to relax, you feel yourself slowly being sucked downwards. Panic sets in as you break through the matted surface, and a strange combination of rot, pollen, and vinegar hits your nostrils as you become completely submerged in the dark, wet matter below. Surrounded by total darkness, you feel cold sensations on your skin. You are now entirely buried in the stagnant waters of the peatland. Around you are other bog bodies, memories of distant relations, generations, and the future. Being here, you're reminded of all the things, kin, life that you care about. What would it mean to be without them? But just as all light falls to shadow, you feel your wings slowly transform into something entirely different. Mossy tendrils shoot up through the black soil, and your leaves, half dead and alive, reach for the surface, and the sound of birdsong calls you back into the world again. Now you can open your eyes and look around the room. Philosopher Donna Haraway writes, "We live in disturbing times, mixed up times, troubling and turbid times. Our task is to make trouble, to stir up potent response to devastating events, as well as to settle troubled waters and rebuild quiet places. By paying attention to our peatlands, we can do just this. The wicked problems of today are not simple. Climate and social justice is not simple. Knowing how to take action requires us to think across complex ecological webs, consider multiple scales and time periods. It requires technical expertise, local knowledge, and power. But knowing why to take action simply requires us to care. Today, we're surrounded by both visceral and institutional violence on a global scale. War, genocide, ecocide. And in all this devastation, it's easy to lose ourselves in apathy. No wonder the next generation have turned to rotting on social media as a way of coping. So, the golden question, why care? Well, look around. This planet that we live on is incredible. It's surprising and creative, and in every mundane-looking landscape, there are whole worlds to discover. And like peatlands, no matter how small we are, we also have an important role to play in preserving life over millennia, or destroying it in a generation. And it's in this strange ultimatum, through this boggy portal, that peatlands offer a space to transform our grief into love, tragedy into possibility, and apathy into action. Thank you.